have with us today Andrew Wigan, who just completed his 34th vintage as chief winemaker for Peter Lehman Wines here in Australia. His wines have won a long list of prestigious international awards, and we're going to have the pleasure of being able to sample some of those tonight at our annual banquet.
Finer grades.
Please welcome Andrew Wigan.
Thank you very much, Linda. Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a pleasure to escape South Australia today and come up to this sunny clime of Sydney. When I got out of my back door in the Barossa Valley this morning, it was very cold and it was threatening rain, so I thought, what a day to come to Sydney when it'll be 26 degrees and sunny. So here we are, and I'm going to give a little bit of our perspective of Peter Lehman on how we've used Perlite over the years and what it does for us in the wine industry. I believe there are a lot of other uses for Perlite around the world, but in the Barossa Valley it's just solely in the filtration process. So just a little bit of background. There'll be a few pictures come up which will sort of show the Barossa, which will show the old vines and some of the old growers. Some of the growers are older than the vines, but you'll get to look at that. The Barossa Valley is a small, very special winemaking district in South Australia. It nestles up in the high hills about an hour's drive north of Adelaide. And Adelaide, as you could see before, is right down the bottom of the country. It was settled by the German immigrants seeking religious freedom in the 1840s, and they found it an ideal location to plant their fruit trees, their vegetables and their grapevines. And the valley basically has flourished ever since around about 1840. There are many Lutheran churches dotted throughout the Barossa, and there is still a very strong German culture today. Particularly with the butchers and the bakers as they attend their smokehouses and the wood-fired ovens. Another strong point is that the Barossa is home to most of the oldest Shiraz plantings in the world. We have plantings that are up to 160 years old, and they're still on their original roots that were planted by the Germans. And the reason for this is that we've been very lucky in our part of the world. We haven't had the great pest phylloxera. And phylloxera is the bug that wiped out the grape vineyards of Northern America and Europe earlier last century. So we're very clean and green. We protect that very carefully. We have lots of measures to keep the phylloxera bug out. And because of that, we have these ancient vineyards which do produce some wonderful, wonderful wines. The early wines made in the district were all fortifieds. Back in the middle 1800s, that's what people drank in Australia. They sort of started off with rum, with the early settlers, and they moved to ports and sherries. And these were the predominant wines of the day, and they were made in a very rudimentary fashion and obviously didn't require any sophisticated equipment, filtration, anything like that. But that was a long time ago. You fast forward to the 1980s, and the Barossa is now making outstanding red wines from as witnessed by the Henschke Hill of Grace, which comes off a 150-year-old Shiraz vineyard, and many of the components for Penfolds Grange. I don't know if you've ever come across Grange, but it's arguably Australia's most favourite wine, or most famous wine, and a lot of those vineyards are in the Barossa. So, moving along, with the production, or with the increase in production of table wines, the accountants started to move in. And you know what happens when accountants move in. you know, they're demanding more efficiencies. They want everything, they want to maximise everything, and that's the basis of good business. And in order to make really high quality table wines, particularly white wines such as Riesling and Semillon, we're going to be drinking some Riesling and Semillon tonight, there is a need to clarify the juice prior to fermentation. If you don't clarify the juice when you're making a delicate white wine, it'll be a little bit thick, it'll be a little bit phenolic, it'll be down in quality. And in the very early days, that's how the white wines were made, and you know, they were pretty rough and ready wines. But as we learnt more about quality white wine production, we realised there was a need with certain types of white wine to clarify the juice. And if we clarified the juice prior to putting the yeast in, we would get a much more delicate, much more fruit-driven, beautifully green tinged white wine rather than an off-yellow, thick, heavy wine. So that was the sort of basis there. Now, grape juice contains roughly about 5% solids, and this has to be removed before the fermentation process begins. Following harvest, the grapes are crushed, chilled, and the juice drained immediately to settling tanks where pectolytic enzymes are added, and the solids settle overnight to the bottom of the tank. The clear juice usually amounts to around about 70%, and you've got about 30% sort of solidsy juice at the bottom. So the next morning we rack off or pump off all the clear juice. That goes to a fermentation vessel. We add cultured yeast, and the fermentation process on that clear juice starts, and that's the beginning of the white wine. But now we have to deal with the 30% sort of solids that are left, and you know, it's murky looking juice. It's got the consistency of runny porridge. It's quite cloudy. It's a concentration of solids, and our job is to get the solids out of that and capture the clear juice from there, because we can't afford to throw 30% away. In the old days, it was okay. The 30% that was left behind would go for fortified winemaking. But you know, over the last 20 or 30 years, the demand for fortified wine has reduced, and the demand for high quality table wine has increased. So we had to work out a process in which we could reclaim that clear juice from the solids. And that's where Perlite comes in, basically. The answer to the winemaker's prayer came in the form of a machine called a rotary drum vacuum filter. Some of you be aware of these, or in other words, what we call an RDV. This is basically a rotating drum with a stainless steel mesh screen, and the ability to pull a vacuum as it rotates and passes through the stainless steel trough containing the liquid to be filtered. Prior to filtration, the drum is coated with about a 3 to 4 inch coating of perlite that has been prepared as a slurry. We actually get the perlite in bulk bags. I think from memory there's something like 330 Ks, but we get them in bulk bags. We used to get them in small 25 kilogram bags, but now we use bulk bags, and that works very, very well for us. So the perlite acts as the filter medium. The runny juice or the settlings are pulled through the perlite as the drum rotates and goes through a trough. And as it goes through the perlite, it comes out clear and goes straight to fermentation. Then there's a knife on the machine that constantly, as it revolves, takes off the dirty layer and exposes a clean perlite face, and it's a continuous filtration situation. So at the end of the day, all the clear juice is recovered. The really heavy solids, they just go to wastage, And it all goes back, it's high quality juice then, and it goes back to the main fermentation tank, and then goes through fermentation. And you know, that process takes about 10 days to 2 weeks, and then instead of grape juice, you've got rudimentary white wine, and we go on with the next process. So that's basically how Perlite works for us. You know, we started with our first RDV in 1982, and at that stage we were fermenting. We were fermenting and crushing probably 15,000 tonnes of grapes. And when we first got the machine, we started to use diatomaceous earth because we thought, you know, that's what we were doing through the rest of the process for other parts of filtration. But we had a hell of a time with diatomaceous earth. When we were coating up the machine, all of a sudden we get these huge cracks appearing, and then the cake would fall off halfway through, and the blokes would swear. Then they'd come and tell the winemakers, and the winemakers would swear. And we'd get behind in our schedule of keeping everything up to scratch. And I was just talking to another winemaker, I think it might have been from the Yalumba Wine Company one day, and he said, we used to have that problem with diatomaceous earth. We use perlite. I said, well, how do we get perlite? They said, I was placed in Sydney. So we got the number and rang Ospearl, and that was 31 years ago. It worked like a dream. We've had fantastic service from that company, although it's changed names over the years. But for 31 years, we've had a terrific relationship, and all the wines that we've put through, including the reds and the whites, have had a degree of filtration through perlite, so we have that to thank. There is, of course, a bit of a dark cloud on the horizon in the form of cross-flow filtration. Cross-flow filtration is making its presence really felt in the wine industry. We used to use diatomaceous earth on our earth filters when we were treating low solids wines and low solids juices. We'd use diatomaceous earth. But, you know, there's a danger with diatomaceous earth. You know, there's possible carcinogenic effects, there's dust, there's all sorts of things. So, and it's quite labour intensive. So a couple of years ago, we invested in cross-flow filtration for that type of filtration. But we still have maintained, we've still maintained the RDV and perlite for high solids filtration. But there is certainly, they are certainly improving the technology on cross-flow filtration for high solids filtration, and I would expect, you know, in the next 12, 24 months, maybe 3 years, that we'll be in a position where we have to consider replacing the current RDV and perlite with a cross-flow machine once that technology reaches that stage, because, you know, cross-flow is a lot less labour intensive. You can set it up, it goes all night, and you know, it just does the job. But I would be pretty scared to throw out the, you know, the bath with the baby with the bathwater. So when we do it, we'll probably go into it where we perlite some and where we cross-flow some. But that is a looming challenge, and it would be remiss of me to not mention that and just give you a blue sky situation. So that is one of the clouds on the horizon as far as perlite use in the wine industry goes. Guys, that's about it. When I was asked to come up and talk about perlite and RDV filtration, I thought it's a pretty dry subject. But does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? You know, I've had a fair bit of experience with it over the years, as have many winemakers. So if there are any questions that are bugging you, I'd be very happy to answer. Yeah.
How does cross-flow filtration work?
Well, basically, you have a membrane and you have liquid passing that membrane, and you know, there's osmotic pressures that are applied, and depending on the size of the membrane, you get two streams. You get the filtered stream and you get the retentate. And the filtered stream, that's the one that is basically clear juice. Depending on the size of membrane you've used, will depend on the clarity. But we just want to get it sort of so that it's sort of cellar bright, as we say. So if you hold the glass up, you can basically see through it, and that's about as far as we go. And then the retentate keeps circulating and circulating, and it's a continuous process, so that as the juice passes through the membrane, we get the clear offtake.
Andrew, you've been using these cross-flow filtration for 2 years, you say?
About 2 years.
And
yeah.
The membranes, do they last?
So far, no problems. You know, we've been told, I think, somewhere between 7 and 10 years, but we were told by people who are selling them. So, but also we spoke to a lot of other winemakers. We're owned. Peter Lehmann Wines is owned by a Swiss company, the Hess family. They're based in Switzerland, but they own a winery in the Napa. They own the Hess collection. They own Glencarlu in Paarl in South Africa, and they also own Colomé, which is the highest, you know, winery in the world, up in Argentina. And Donald Hess was the one who convinced us that we needed to go to cross-flow filtration, because all the other companies in the group were using it, and we probably weren't. We was, you know, probably a little bit traditional. So on his recommendation, we spoke to the other winemakers in our group who'd been using them, and we went from there. So far, you know, there's been a few little teething problems, but the technicians that come with the company, our machine is a Della Toffler. We're the only one in our group that has a Della Toffler. The others have different ones, but we sort of like to look at Della Toffler. So far we've been giving it a fair old thrashing, and yeah, so far everything is good.
The initial investment for the membrane technology much different than investment for Rotary vac? No,
probably not a great deal. The only thing is that we've already got the Rotary vacs, but we feel the crossflow will pay itself back within probably 2 to 3 years because of the decrease in losses. You know, when you're doing things with a bulk earth filter, there's wastage every time, because, you know, you push through with water and you get all this diluted stuff, and you get none of that with crossflow. So we're getting a sort of pretty 99.99% recovery from crossflow, and we're not losing those every time you change your earth and, you know, recharge your machine. You're not losing that portion. So we think it's the way to go. We think the wines are probably even brighter going through crossflow, but we're using it for pre-bottling filtration, so it goes very, very fine. And you know, the wines look quite bright. Certainly no detrimental effect on the wines. So I'd have to say at this stage we're very happy with introducing crossflow. But at this stage, I'm also nervous that the technology isn't there really to handle grape solids yet, and I'd really rather wait a while and let someone bigger do all the testing and checking, because if you commit completely to something like that and it doesn't work, all of a sudden you've got a hell of a problem on your hands in the middle of vintage, because grape juice doesn't hang around and wait. You know, it starts fermenting by itself. So, you know, when we do it, we will probably still do some RDV work, but how long that is away, I don't know. But it's not going to happen this year.
What is the destination of the waste cake?
We send that up to a distillery at Nuriupa, and they recover tartaric acid. They also recover alcohol. So they've got a tartaric business. That's where all our sort of tank scrapings, all the whinstone and all that goes up to that company. So they recover the tartaric from the actual grape juice, and then we buy it back and use it for pH adjustment, and they get really rich. But they tell you they tell you they don't. They tell you they're on the bones of their backside.
You mentioned white wine in your introduction and not red wine. You don't use much Perlite?
Yeah, no, we do with the red wine, but I thought I'd just use the white as the major example, because most of, probably 75% of our filtration is with white. We do use it on the gross lees of a red. You know, when you make a red wine, you pump the skins and the seeds and the juice all in together. You ferment it on skins for 7 days or 10 days to get all the colour out. Then you press it all off and let it ferment out. And then after a few more days, most of the solids settle to the bottom of the tank. We call that gross lees. And so what we do is we centrifuge the clearer juice off, and that really cleans it up, and you're left with probably about 8 to 10% gross lees at the bottom. It's really heavy stuff, and we then put that through the machine. Sometimes we get a little bit of dilution with that, so the top wines, it doesn't go back into them, it goes back into more the lower end wines, or the or the middle range wines. But it's still used a fair bit on red, but mainly on white. So, and you know, if we do a fining on a finished white wine, say we do a milk fining or something like that, and you end up with some nice milky fluffy lees, we also put that through the drum, and that'll reclaim that. So, you know, it's all about quality and efficiency. And it's something that's been very, very important to us, you know, in the last 30 years or so. Up until then, there was a lot of wastage in the wine industry, and we were one of the first in the district to actually put RDVs in. And we, because we took the chance and put them in, we got a whole lot of contract work, and we actually paid both machines off in 12 months. But today, you know, everyone really has some sort of RDV machine. It's part and parcel. The really small guys don't, and they probably don't worry about it too much, but just about everyone else does. So it's something that grew in the last 30, 35 years in the Australian wine industry, and has become a very important tool in our usage.
The methods of purifying the wine, those change the flavor, the aroma?
The method of
you know, filtering the wine, does it change the flavor?
No, it doesn't. You know, we put, you know, a little bit of water through first, and a little bit of citric acid, and we make sure all that's done. And I've never really noticed any you know, off flavours or earthy flavours in the wine. Certainly there's nothing in cross flow, but no, it's good. And with the whites, you know, because the juice is only in solids, in contact with the solids for about 24 hours at the most, you know, the juice that comes out of that is A grade material, and it goes straight back into the main ferment. But it's different with gross lees that have been through the fermentation process in red wines and have to sit there for maybe 1 week, 2 weeks, even 3 weeks. They get a bit leesy, and they get it's nothing. It's no flavour from the earth. It's just what gross lees smell like. The longer you leave them, the muddier they get. So if we can hit them very quickly, that's pretty well A grade. But if they've been in contact with themselves for a fair while, then we go down to B grade or C grade. Okay, no further questions? All right, well, thanks very much for your attention. I'm going to stick around and come back for the dinner tonight, and we're going to make you drink some wines that have been through Perlite. Yay. We've got a couple of really special white wines that have been aged for a few years. They're our two top wines. There's a Riesling and a Semillon, which are very specific to the Barossa. And then we're going to have a look at a Shiraz and a Cabernet with the main course. And I'll get up and talk a little bit about the wines, and if you guys have got any questions, we'll have a chat, and you can sit back and pat yourselves on the back for what Perlite's allowed us to do. So thank you very much.
Pretty well known winemaker, that guy. Very well known, very respected. That's a good one. Very good. You like sports? I don't know if you drink the wines or ports, but they make a 20-year-old touring port. It's $6 a bottle, but it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
I wonder why all of a sudden go to the crossflow. What all of a sudden?
Well, I would say it's a lot less cost involved. You don't have to keep on Perlite. You don't have to get rid of the Perlite.
Okay, well, this concludes the speaker portion of our conference. And I want to again thank everyone for coming and thank all of our wonderful speakers. And we'll see you tonight at our annual banquet starting at 6 o'clock in the hotel lobby, and then the banquet itself will be in the Elizabeth Room at 7. And so see you all there.